From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Teeth like candy corn.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a sudden flash of memory, that partial license plate number, a nice way to offer a mint to someone whose breath you can smell through their mask, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host. She went online and bought the giant Christmas unicorn, and now the UPS guy is filing an anti-stalking restraining order. Melissa Morgan.
What? More cowbell. Wait, what? Why is the UPS guy filing an anti-stalking restraining order because I ordered a unicorn?
Because you're so excited that it's coming, you keep stalking him.
Okay, all right, sorry. I was like, you told me I could.
Oh, I know. I think it's great. I think
it was some evil person. Oh, it was Tipster Sandy.
Was it Sandy or was it Kazuya?
No, she answered.
Oh, okay.
She answered. She commented. I mean, it was Sandy, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, it was not on sale.
It's a big old unicorn.
6 foot lit, not lit like having a party, but has lights.
It's going to be the centerpiece of this year's lawn decoration.
Christmassy unicorn that's all lit up. So it's 6 foot. Yeah, it's just like probably some wire with like a horn.
What I'm hoping is, no, it looks like it's pretty nice. What I'm hoping, though, is that it's not like one of those things that you have to assemble like IKEA furniture.
God,
that it's just simple and it's not going to require,
I didn't think of that.
We bought some of those before. We never got them done because we can't figure out.
I had the cutest, you like threw a couple of things away. I had the cutest like wire lit Santa pig. And I ran over him by accident.
Right. Now
I backed over him.
Now that was not an installation problem. That was Melissa ran over it problem.
That was a user error.
That was user error, right? That was big time user
backed
error.
over the Santa pig.
yeah. It was a cute Santa pig too.
But he did not fare well.
He didn't. You killed him.
No, we didn't even get any bacon out of it.
That's
It's terrible.
Yeah, but
it was a lose-lose as opposed to a win-win.
Well, I can't remember what the last one was. It was going to be a really nice.
I can't remember either, but you couldn't put it together, and you got frustrated, and you were just like, "That's it!" and threw it away.
Threw it away because what happened was we ended up breaking part of it.
No, when you say we, you mean you?
Yeah, I ended up breaking part of it.
Yes, that's what I remember.
So there was no point trying to put it together.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's broken. Denied. Throw it away. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're not having the beautiful
whatever it was.
Yeah, if you break the unicorn, brother, you better look for different housing.
I may hire Home Depot to come over and put it together for us.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right.
Well, we want to say thank you to our beautiful tipsters and to those of you who leave a review, a rating, and subscribe, especially those of you who leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We are an independent podcast here, and we don't have a network supporting us. We don't have an advertising budget. But we do have you, beautiful tipsters, and that's how people find us, is through you, through your word of mouth and through the ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. Jameis Lynn left a beautiful review saying, if you're not listening, you're missing out, which I thought was really sweet. So,
well, she's right.
We're very blessed to have the nicest, kindest people leave us reviews. I mean, there's a couple of shitty ones too, but you can't please everyone. I'm trying to figure that out. So speaking of pleasing everyone, I don't think Producer Mark and I have had this conversation. Where do you come down on candy corn, Producer Mark?
Oh, we've had the conversation.
Have we?
Yeah, we're in complete agreement on candy corn.
That it's Satan's earwax?
At the very least.
Yeah. It's terrible. And it's a horrible excuse. It's not candy. It's
not. It's earwax.
It's Satan's earwax.
It's terrible.
It's how I describe people with unattractive teeth. Usually it's not so much candy corn as like Indian corn, like people with little Indian corn teeth.
Okay.
I'm a tooth aficionado, and tooth enthusiast. Sorry.
She just made that up, folks.
Yeah, it's not easy. Or I mean, it's not difficult to make up tooth enthusiast. but I like teeth and smiles and, and it's not like the teeth have to be perfect, but they can't be orange, or a really dark shade of Indian corn or candy corn.
Or candy corn.
So a friend posted, in an effort to kind of get everyone's mind off of all the other things in the world. She was like, look, I'm coming down on the side that candy corn's delicious. Let's discuss.
Wait, who was this?
It's no one you know. It's a podcast host.
She must be banned.
Right. I'm not going to ever talk to her again. But
right.
But she did, post this, and it garnered a lot of, I would say it was like 80 to 20. 80% people were like, it's the worst. And 20% were like, I like the one called Autumn Harvest. And it's like in the shape of, it's all by Brock's.
Wait a minute. There's different types of candy corn?
There's candy corn that's in the shape of an acorn. It's larger.
Oh, God.
And more repugnant.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, candy, I know some of you tipsters, I'm probably driving listeners away, and I'm certainly not going to get that big Brock's account that I was hoping for.
Hey, Brock's, as soon as we get the account, we love candy corn.
No. That's why I don't have advertisers, because I would have a hard time saying, my beloved listeners, please grab a handful of Brock's candy corn on your way out of the home.
Except you love the Brock's candy canes.
Brock's makes the best candy canes. Now, I will also, this is going off in a direction I didn't really care to go. I'm a bit of a picky bitch about candy. I don't like a whole lot of it, but there are certain things I like and certain manufacturers. I saw a YouTube host that I adore who does, her name is Sarah Jane. She does something called like Chic on the Cheap or something. And she does like, home decor decorating and stuff like that. She's just adorable. But she did the most awful thing, and I just didn't have the heart to tell her. She recommended Palmer candy.
Oh no.
I know.
Oh, come on.
And apparently the Dollar Tree is, I know, Palmer.
That's the worst candy.
It's not candy. It's wax. It's not Jinx, owe me a Coke.
Everything from the chocolate to everything they make.
The chocolate bunnies from Palmer, you basically just set fire to them. So she recommended, Palmer is making these like chocolate covered spoons that you put in like your hot cocoa and they melt. But the thing she recommended that I was like, oh, Sarah Jane, no. It's a hot chocolate kit. And you heat up milk, and then you throw these chocolate Santas in it, and it melts. And I'm going to be honest, if they're Palmer chocolate Santas and you put them in hot milk, I'm guessing it's like a portal to hell. I doubt they're even going to melt.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't imagine even the melting.
Right. Because it's wax. It's made of weasel buttholes.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's made out of,
God.
but I love Sarah Jane, but I didn't even have the heart to leave a message. One person said, Palmer candy is the worst in my humble opinion. And I thought, oh, you speak for all of us, darling. And to me, she's like, I am putting these in gift sets. And I was like, you're going to lose every friend. If you make a Christmas gift set with like a mug and Palmer Santas that melt, and your friends aren't going to talk to you anymore.
I think we've discovered two podcast hosts that we have to disown now.
Well, she's a YouTuber, and then I can't talk to Charlie anymore because she likes candy corn. So I'm losing friends left and right over candy. It does seem like it's not that important, but
we did become diverted. Were there other things you wanted to say about candy corn?
No.
I mean,
I've forgotten that you didn't like it either.
Oh.
I asked you in all honesty because I had a divorce attorney on speed dial, and if you had said you like it,
yeah,
I would have pressed.
Yeah, well, I have one on speed dial too. If I had heard that if you even bring those things into this house,
no,
because I'm afraid that they would cause some sort of toxic event.
Yes,
in the house.
I agree completely. Their candy Brock's or any other manufacturer, candy corn or Autumn Harvest, I feel like it's a joke. I feel like it's a joke product.
Yeah.
That,
Well, there's if I would highly recommend the the Lewis Black comedy bit about candy corn. He
that's right.
pretty much says everything there is to say about it. And if I didn't get in trouble for playing it, I'd play it here.
Right.
But go Lewis Black candy corn. Just
Google
it.
that. It's very funny and so perfect. It really is perfect. He speaks my soul.
Yeah.
And 80% of the people who commented on the Facebook post that candy corn is delicious. I'm like, what part of I can't even
I'm just shivering.
I know.
And before we move on, I do want to say that I am scanning as we speak Amazon.com for Stephen King's latest novel, The Tooth Enthusiast. I think that's got to be a Stephen King novel.
It is not. Stop it.
That's a great
I don't
title.
mean I take them out of people's mouths or heads. I mean I like smiles. Oh, for God's sake. Why is everything I say
brilliant? It's
No.
brilliant. It's a brilliant title.
No, it just becomes like a terrible thing that people, oh God. Anyway. So on to this week's episode, which is, I know it's been covered in a lot of places and it's just so unique and different and puzzling in so many ways. I get why it is, has been covered by a couple of podcasts. In a way, it's been covered. I think it was at the time in the late 90s, it was covered a lot because it was so unique and because weird things kept happening. And then it sort of has fallen by the wayside. But you can find great information from the Tampa Bay Press, from the St. Petersburg Times, and there's a wonderful true crime writer named Kat Lee, last name spelled Leigh, on medium.com. And she always does great write-ups. She's a really wonderful writer. She somehow manages to get the humanizing part of some of these difficult stories in her writing, but she's very journalistic in the way she writes. She's a really good writer. She's just I think you'll enjoy reading it if you find her work on medium.com. And it is the case of Diane Augat. Now, I believe her last name is French. Her husband's name was Friedrich, and it was spelled uniquely. Diane, before we get to what happened to her, had a normal life. And the thing about people with mental illness is that they're more likely to become victim of crimes. It's a horrible thing. The number of people, even just in our area, who have, gone missing and been found deceased, and we don't know exactly what happened. Sometimes it's believed they succumb to the elements. You never know exactly. They become dehydrated, disoriented, and people are like, people don't just lay down and die. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it happens. You think you're going to lay down to rest and you don't recover. So we have not found Diane. She is missing, but parts of her have emerged, which makes the case even more terrible. But she, began her life in a normal way. She got married to Friedrich. He operated a long-term care facility. She was a mother to 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. And at the age of 30 in 1990, she was diagnosed bipolar. And it had changed everything. Quite frankly, there were signs from 1988 through 1990 until she got an official diagnosis. She had been arrested for abuse to her children, and they actually believed that she had Munchausen by proxy. It's such a layered, terrible case.
That's really terrible.
Really terrible. And by 1991, she and Friedrich had divorced, and he got custody of the kids. Now, between 1990 and 1998, Diane had been involuntarily committed 32 times. There's something called, in Florida, it's called the Baker Act, where a judge, a police officer, someone who can make a determination that a person is a danger to themselves or others can be involuntarily committed.
That's a lot.
32 times.
That's like 4 times a year.
Yep. 32 times in 8 years. It was bad. And she really needed, according to her mother, Mildred, she really needed to be kept long-term. And she kept being released and re-released. and recommitted and re-released. And she would move between staying with her mother, staying with her sister Deborah, and staying in her own home in Odessa, Florida. Now, this is Pasco County. And I was going to ask producer Mark, are you familiar with the US 19 highway?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know much about Pasco County. I don't know a lot about Florida. I revert to my beloved, Patton Oswalt, who says Florida is where bad things go to happen. So I don't, it's been a long time since I've been to Florida and nothing good ever happened when I went there. It was a long, long time ago, but still, I know a lot of people love it. It's a great place to go. It's a wonderful vacation destination. It just feels like it's filled with all sorts of terribleness.
Now this is in the Tampa area, right? This is where this is happening.
I don't know where Odessa is, where Hudson is. I don't know. All I know is that because I don't know the area. It's the US 19 highway runs through it.
Yeah, I believe this is Western Florida, which is a little bit better than what they call South Florida, but Florida, yeah.
Okay. Florida nonetheless. So this is 1998. So Diana's living with her sister in Odessa, staying with her, and she had just been released from a several-week involuntary commitment at a mental institution just 2 weeks before. And she's staying with her sister, Deborah. Her sister goes to a doctor's appointment, and at about 11 a.m. is when she leaves on April 10th of 1998. And pretty much right after that, Diane is seen walking down US 19 near New York Avenue in Hudson, Florida. So she had walked quite a ways from Odessa to Hudson, several miles. I mean, they're neighboring towns, but she had walked several miles. Her sister, Deborah, comes back from her doctor's appointment, and Diane's gone. And she's like, okay, well, hopefully she'll come back. She doesn't have a car. She can't drive because she's on very heavy medication. And she's like, okay, well, maybe she had a lot of, it's so difficult to say this because you don't want to say something about someone who is not in control of the chemicals in their body and the way their brain functions. But during bipolar episodes, she could become extraordinarily difficult, which is understood, but she also would lower inhibitions. She would meet men of all ages, young, old, make friends easily, became very trusting of people that she probably shouldn't have. And like a lot of people with a mental illness, she, would try and self-medicate with alcohol. So she, became an alcoholic. There are definitely stories about her using drugs and being friends with a bad element that may have supplied her with drugs, which when you already have a mental illness, drugs and alcohol, either combined with your medication or with your chemical imbalance, are not going to be good. And quite frankly, she was known to not take her meds. She would take them for a few weeks and then she would stop taking them for a very long period of time. So 40-year-old Diane is walking down the US 19. Now, there are several reported sightings of her in the coming days, but it's all very odd. There are some things that can be pretty well nailed down and some things that we're going to have to be left. The tipsters are going to hate me at the end of this episode because I'm going to leave you with way more questions than answers, and I'm going to apologize up front for that. But this one is just, it's just a really interesting case of someone with a mental illness who we just don't know what happened to most of her anyway.
And just so the listeners can picture it, I'm looking at a map now, and it is on the west coast of Florida. So it's against the Gulf of Mexico, and it's essentially like a coast highway. It runs from High Point and then down all the way south into St. Petersburg. It's in the Tampa-St. Petersburg general area.
And apparently it was a pretty tough part of town.
Oh, I'm guessing parts of it probably are.
Yeah, really tough part of town, which we'll get into that in the details of this really, really messed up disappearance. So her sister is thinking she'll come back soon. She'll go and she'll come back soon. She was seen that morning, later that morning, early afternoon, walking down the US 19. Diane was seen by passersby walking into town, into Hudson, actually. She goes and has lunch at a diner not far from the Coral Sands Motel. She's seen by a waitress having lunch there. Now, there's no cell phone. She doesn't have a cell phone. She doesn't have a car. She left wearing the clothes on her back. So her mother, Mildred, doesn't, know that she's really been missing because Deborah, her other daughter, hasn't really said. Diane hasn't come home for a couple of days. But 3 days after, her mother, Mildred, comes home and sees on her answering machine from 1998 that it's blinking and there's a phone call. It was 3 days after her daughter had walked away from her sister's home. And it says there's a message that she recognizes as her daughter's voice saying, help me, let me out of here. And then it sounds like a scuffle for the phone. And she hears her daughter Diane say, hey, give me that. And then the call's terminated.
Oh, man.
Now, the caller ID said that the call was placed from a business called Starlight in the Odessa area. Now, of course, Mildred dials the number to call back, but there's no answer. Now, believe me, lots of people have wondered why wasn't this investigated more closely. Maybe the police are holding information back because it's still an open investigation, or maybe they didn't investigate, even though I wouldn't say that they didn't investigate enough. I think it's just such a weird case. So Starlight could have been a couple of things. It could have been an original name for the Coral Sands Motel. There are 6 businesses in the Odessa and Hudson area listed under Starlight. Everything from a strip club to, there's lots of things called Starlight. It sounds like a very 80s and 90s kind of name for a business, right? In Florida. But they never could nail it down, and no one ever answered the number, which is really disturbing. So now the next day, April 14th, a woman is walking to work on the US 19 freeway near the New York Avenue area. And she sees what she thinks is a fake fingertip on the road. And she continues on to work. Later that night, tells her boyfriend, I saw the weirdest thing. It was like a woman's fingertip on the road. It had, nail polish. And the next day, her boyfriend is like, oh, we're going to find it.
Yeah.
And they do.
They were still there.
Yep. And the fingerprint comes back to Diane Augat.
Oh, okay.
Now, here's where things are a little odd, not just finding a fingertip on the freeway, the fingertip of her right middle finger. She was last seen leaving her home. Now, granted, producer Mark is colorblind. I pick out his shirts and ties. We can argue over purple and blue, but she was last known to have on coral nail polish, which is more of an orange, kind of a tomato orange. And this fingertip is a very bright, bright red polish. So I'm not saying someone painted her nails. I'm saying maybe there was just a confusion on the color. It does bother me that her mother is extremely convinced and sure that when she left, she was wearing a white tank top, blue shorts, white sneakers, fingernails painted coral. But a fingertip 4 days later, found on the side of the road by a stranger. Pretty weird that a scavenger hadn't taken it away, an animal or something.
Yeah, a bird it's right by the ocean, so it could have been, but the fingerprints were a match, right?
Yep.
Well, then it's her fingertip.
Yep.
So somebody painted the nail.
Or there was just a disagreement on the color from coral to red.
Right,
but it was her fingertip. Now, can someone live without a fingertip? Absolutely. Could, in a manic, phase in her life, could she have cut her own fingertip off? Yes. Is it likely someone else did it? Probably. But we don't know. There's all sorts of theories. It could have been cut off when she was, being shoved into the back of a car and they slammed the door on it. It could have been cut off when she was being shoved into a trunk and, they slammed the trunk lid. So I don't have a whole lot of experience in life. I'm a pretty boring person. But I can tell you what little I know. I was about 14 and my best friend at the time, Karen, and I think my mom was driving us to school. And I am a codependent people pleaser. So I'm like, oh, Karen can sit in the front. And it was a 4-door Buick LeSabre my mom had. Big pimp mobile.
That's a boat.
It's a boat. It was a big ass boat. And she was a real estate salesperson. So she needed a car she could haul people around to look at houses. So Karen gets in the passenger side in the front, and I'm holding on to the car to get into the back, and she slammed my 3 fingers in the door. And I'm screaming, open the door. And Karen is having trouble finding the handle.
Oh, God.
But it felt like it took forever. And I know that she wasn't sitting there like, I'm not going to open it. She was trying to open the door. She finally gets it open. My mom takes me to the emergency room because my fingers were shaped like, in the middle, they were shaped like a U.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And I just was like, oh, they're all broken, everything. And nope, not a fucking problem. Just bruised all the shit. But x-rays, and the reason it's kind of a funny thing for me is because I was 14, but I was, 5'8", and my mom had purchased me this lovely, like, full-length burgundy leather coat, and it was winter. I probably looked older. I probably looked older than my age because
probably
the doctor
looked like you were in your 20s.
That's exactly what happened. The doctor, the ER doctor was like, well, they're not broken. You're a very lucky young lady and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, so do you can just check out. And I said, do you want to tell my mom what happened? And he's like, why is your mom here? And I was like, because she drove me. And he's like, you can't drive? And I'm like, I'm 14. He's like, oh my God. He thought I was 21 or something.
Probably getting ready to ask you on a date.
I don't think so. But he was so embarrassed that he thought I was older. And, my mom's in the waiting room and he goes and gets, Betty Morgan. And he's like, she's really lucky. It's going to be sore and bruised, but it's no big. So what I've heard, and I don't know a lot about cars, a car door or a trunk lid don't have like razor blades and knives in them. What they have are gaskets and things, to help with the movement of closing. They don't just like slam and anything in their way is cut in half.
Right. They're rounded. There
edges. You go.
Rounded edges, I guess you'd call them. Right?
Yeah. And it's, injuries, sure. It would probably be easier to cut the tip of your finger off like on a door in your house or some other weird freak accident, like tripping and falling, something like that. A car door or a trunk lid, not necessarily going to be the thing unless you just slammed it over and over again until something, we don't have the information on like how clean was the cut, but it couldn't have been, if you slam a finger in a car door or something, it's going to be like mushed and flattened out and torn up. It isn't going to be clearly cut like, oh, this is absolutely a fingertip. To walk down a U.S. highway and see something on the side of the road and immediately identify it as a fingertip means that the nail wasn't, squished and fucked up. It was probably more of a clean cut. So how did that happen? We don't know. So there is absolutely a lot of press about Diane going missing in the St. Petersburg Times, like I mentioned, in the Tampa Bay Press, but no one really knows what happened or why. So there's going to be mention of a few convenience stores as part of this story, and it's going to sound really weird, but Diane's sister Deborah worked part-time at a convenience store called Totally Convenience in Odessa. 2 weeks after Diane has gone missing, the manager of Totally Convenience finds a bag with some neatly folded clothing in the outdoor freezer behind Totally Convenience. Folded nicely, neatly in a bag in the freezer. She brings the clothing into the store and says to Deborah, "Do you know anything about this?" And Deborah recognizes the clothing as Diane's because she had given it to her recently. 2 weeks after she's been missing, and her fingertip is found on the side of the road by a stranger, her neatly folded clothing is inside an outdoor freezer behind the convenience store her sister works at.
Okay. Whoa.
Right? So now the St. Petersburg Times runs a story about Diane's disappearance in 2000, 2 years after she's been missing. The following day, Diane's brother and his girlfriend walk into a Circle K convenience store in Pasco, Florida, and on the counter near the lottery tickets is a clear Ziploc bag with the word Diane written in Sharpie, and inside is a tube of black eyeliner, Taboo perfume, a tube of bright pink lipstick, and the telling thing is a tube of generic toothpaste. The generic toothpaste would have been very similar in size and appearance to what she had been given a few weeks earlier when she was in the mental institution.
Okay, this is really bizarre shit here. Let me get this straight. 2 weeks after she disappears, in a refrigerator or a freezer in the back of the convenience store where Diane's sister works, some clothing is found. And then 2 years after that, her brother happens to walk into a different convenience store, and there's a bag of shit that's obviously hers.
Yes.
I mean, okay, go on. I mean, I can't. I'm totally mesmerized now.
Well, so Diana's this beautiful, she's 40 and she's had a hard life the last 10 years especially. She was this perfect model citizen for the first 30 years of her life, and then finally diagnosed as bipolar, and things just really spiraled down. And apparently when her husband got custody of the kids, that's when things really went off the rails for her. Completely understood. But she's very beautiful. She has these very electric blue eyes, and she's a very pretty woman. Beautiful hair. She was very smart, and she was very, very mentally ill. Everyone in her family, really believed that she should have been kept longer at the institution. And, now when they find a finger and her clothing 2 years later, of course, police are like, well, we think, foul play is involved. Mm-hmm. Do you? Do you really think that? Maybe? So as far as suspects, her home that she, but she had been staying with her sister Deborah so she could keep an eye on her, and then that didn't work out because her sister had to go to a doctor's appointment. Her home in Odessa had been burglarized sometime after she went missing. They don't know the exact date because no one was in the home, but sometime between April 11th and April 18th, when they went to look at her house, did they find out it had been burglarized. Now, that's also in question because they're not sure if it was actually burglarized or if a group of young men in their 20s that she had seemed to have met at a difficult development called Viva Villas. She had partied with a bunch of young men there as friends, of course, that they had told people that she said, oh yeah, you can have my house. You can have my house. I'm not there. You can party there. So either the house was burglarized by strangers or the people that she had sort of let, the squatters she had let live there maybe did some damage and took some shit. But we know that happened. We know her fingers found by a stranger. We know her clothing is found 2 weeks later at her sister's place of work. And we know the day after, an article in the St. Petersburg Press about her and her being missing. Other items that belong to her are found in a different convenience store.
That's the weird thing.
Now, how would someone know that her brother, who stopped for a pack of cigarettes and a soft drink?
Completely randomly, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, ugh.
Yep.
That freaks me out.
Yep. So they say there's no real suspects. Now, the police had said there was one person of interest, and they don't explain to Diane's family or anyone else why this person would have been a person of interest. But his name was Gary Robert Evers. Now, he and his girlfriend, Rose Casper, had managed the Coral Sands Motel, which could have at one point, it's now a defunct motel in this crappy part of Pasco. It could have been the Starlight. That could have been where she made the call from. But that's conjecture. But in 2001, at 4 a.m. on June 27th, 2 masked gunmen broke into the Coral Sands Motel and pistol whipped Rose Casper. When Gary Robert Evers heard his girlfriend Rose being beaten, he burst into the room with his own gun, and the gunmen fled. Now, they were wearing masks. It's 4 a.m., but they're wearing masks. Gary Robert Evers believes he knows, he's 52 at the time, he believes he knows who did this. And it's a man named Todd Cammers who lived in this Viva Villas area right behind the Coral Sands Motel, where also Diane had met friends that she partied with. He thinks, Gary is like, I know who did this. So he's like, hey, why don't you come over? This is the guy who's like the Tony Soprano of, Shittsville. They say he,
I see.
he ran the neighborhood, is what they said of 26-year-old Todd Cammers. So they were like, he's the guy who, is kind of head of a burglary ring, blah, blah, blah. So Gary Robert Evers says, hey, why don't you come over for a drink? And he invites him over, ties him to a chair, threatens him and says, tell me who did this. Todd Cammers is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know anyone who did this. And it didn't matter. Gary Robert Evers just unloaded 2 clips of his 9mm into Todd Cammers' face and upper body.
Well, that's not a very good idea.
Mm-hmm. And he obviously he didn't care. This was a retaliation for him. There was a witness, and the witness immediately called the police. And of course, he's, indicted. And it turns out just awful. Todd Cammers was innocent. He didn't know anything about it. And 2 other men actually got arrested for their armed robbery a few months later. But in the meantime, Gary Robert Evers is, charged with first-degree murder because he lured Todd Cammers over and shot him. He's given life without parole for first-degree murder in 2004. And then he dies in prison 8 years later, never having said anything about Diane, never admitting to anything, never saying he knew her, nothing. So where is Diane Augat? What happened to her after she left her sister's home on April 10th? What happened after she called her mother on April 13th? What happened when a stranger found her fingertip on the 14th? What happens when her sister's manager finds her clothing folded neatly in the outdoor freezer of the convenience store where she worked? And who placed a Ziploc bag 2 years later on the counter of a Circle K for her brother and her brother's girlfriend to find? What does all of this mean? What happened? Who did this? If you or anyone you know knows anything about what could have happened to Diane Louise Augat, please email jhatcher@pascosheriff.org or call the Pasco Sheriff's Office at 1-800-854-2862, extension 7723, and more cowbell.
If you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.